Death's Chess Game by Dorian J. Sinnott. The day young Thomas Whitmore died, there was no mourning. Instead, everything in the boy's room was turned to white. The curtains were drawn open to let in the newfound light, and nursemaids changed the linen on his bed. Even the lilies left by his mother upon his nightstand bloomed anew, brighter than ever. Yet, while his mother and father wept, they were tears of joy. For the day young Thomas Whitmore died, he was reborn. In the moments prior, only darkness had settled behind his eyes when he drew his final breath. Hallways of endless shadows paved with blind memories. No longer could he hear the whispers of his loved ones, for they'd been drowned out by silence. The only voice amidst the endless void was the beckon of death, and Thomas refused to heed. A boy on the cusp of 13, he knew well enough that there was still life to live. Death had come too soon, and with each of his calls, Thomas turned away. "My time has not come," he repeatedly stated. "Come again for me when I have grown old." "Your time has run out," Death replied, "and I do not cater only to the elderly." Thomas faced Death once more with a burning resentment deep in his eyes. Perhaps to Death, the only kindle of life that still remained, but the boy still clung to. "But you cannot have me," Thomas said. "I have much to live for, much to see. My life has barely begun." Death shook his head. "I'm afraid life lost that match, my friend. I am the master when it comes to a good game of chess. Why, the pieces usually fall right into my lap. So why not let me play? Why must life wager my soul when I myself should be the one betting it?" Thomas asked. "Surely I am a far better master than you." There was a hesitant pause before Death drew a smile. "Well, you certainly have a strong spirit, dear boy. But I'm afraid you, nor anyone else for that matter, is a match for me. When I am called, I always win." Thomas straightened himself up and locked his gaze with Death. "And I only play to win. And I, too, have never lost." "You just won't budge, will you?" Death asked, Thomas remaining still. "Very well, but one game, one chance. That's all you get." "That's all I need." Death's pieces were built of bone, the board icy to the touch, as Thomas was certain his body had become. With a swift motion of his hand, Death instructed Thomas to command the pieces of white. "A slight advantage," Death jeered. "After all, it's life that gets the first move in the game. Death just follows." Thomas took a seat across from Death, eyeing his pieces intently. The opening play was the most important. It was the building block to all that came after, the fate of the game. Carefully guiding his hand, he chose his first move. Pawn to d4, setting up for a queen's gambit. Death had seen this move many times in his matches against life, the sacrifice of one to keep another thriving. Hardly. And wrong indeed Death was. An impenetrable wall of defense soon lined Thomas's side of the board, playing gambits of its own only to lash back and take Death's strongest pieces. But Death didn't hesitate. He simply smiled and continued making his moves, slowly bringing down the barrier and closing in on his target, the White King, the beacon of life. "Even the strongest forces can't keep me out," Death said. "Your wall was well played, but time erodes the foundation and makes it weak." "Weakness doesn't mean defeat," Thomas replied, and sure enough, he countered the damage he had taken. "Defeat is only when you give in." Death shook his head with a slight grin. "My, your fortitude truly is one to admire." The game dragged on for what felt like hours, the chill of the air rising off the pieces and numbing Thomas's fingers. He could sense a stalemate with each of Death's moves, but he wasn't about to have it. In a game for life, he thought, there can be no ties with Death. With a careful slide of his hand to move a lone pawn, Thomas nudged the rook beside it, just enough so it touched the adjacent square. One move closer to locking in Death's king. He continued with this trick a few more times, carefully watching to see if Death had taken notice. Yet not a word was spoken. Thomas was certain he had overseen it. Gliding his rook across the polished bone board, Thomas allowed a smile to tug at his lips. Check. There was no expression of shock from death, not even a question of how it could have been possible. Life never gets this far, Thomas thought. Shouldn't death be surprised at least? Somewhat taken aback. The only response that the boy was met with, however, was a correction. That's checkmate, boy. Thomas leaned forward to inspect the board, confirming what Death had stated was true. Ah, he exclaimed, so it is. Well then. His eyes scanned Death, waiting for a reply. A congratulations. Anything. Instead, he was met only with the very silence he had awoken to when life had bid him farewell, leaving him to the darkness. An honorary game, I'll give you that. Perhaps I was wrong about you. You fight for life far stronger than many I've ever seen, Death said after a moment. Therefore, as we agreed, I leave you to bask in her light until we are to meet again, when you have, as you offered, grown old. Thomas nodded with a smile, but gave no reply. As he stood and began to walk away from the board, towards the faint beacon of light at the end of the darkness, Death called out to him. This time, however, his voice wasn't as embracing as it had been when he first beckoned him. The deep, dry tone was chilling, and it caused Thomas to stop. I should warn you, though, dear boy. There is a price to be paid. A price? Thomas asked. What do you mean? When one cheats against death, one also cheats against life. Don't think I didn't sense your moves back there. A simple flick of the wrist, a nudge of the knuckle. Crafty, I give you that. Determined. The churning in Thomas's gut was unbearable. But, as I said, life and death are intertwined, more alike than you may think. I think our very game has proven that to you. So what will you do? What price must I pay? Thomas tried to shake the quiver from his voice. Surely there's no greater punishment than death. But there is, my boy. Death motioned to light at the far end of the void. Life. With a strained gasp, Thomas awoke to the endless white of his bedroom. The sounds of late spring were upon him, drifting in through the open window. His parents and nursemaid embraced him, their tears of joy welcoming him back to the wonders of life, born anew with no signs of ailing, of pain. Young Thomas appeared to have never fallen within death's grasp. A dream, Thomas convinced himself. That's all it had been. A deep slumber I fell into, a state of comatose, playing with my inner demons, a match against myself, my nightmares, my fears. Death? No. He never came for me. Yet, as the years passed and Thomas grew, he began to deny his initial thought. While he was blessed with good health and radiant life, those around him felt death. First his mother, only a year after his reawakening, taken in the night suddenly. Then his tutors and dear friends. His father had been next, on the eve of Thomas's 20th birthday. One by one they disappeared, claimed by death, but not strategic enough to win their way back to life's side of the board. It was only when Thomas married a young woman, Emily, a few towns over, he thought the curse to be gone. They lived alone in happiness, never witnessing death's cruel touch. They had a daughter, a new seed of life, and the rays of warmth that Thomas felt were never stronger. It was, as he claimed, as if he were once more reborn through her, perhaps more so than death. Happiness, he thought. That's what life is. That's what really living feels like. But on that cold and rainy night, death did come to claim another. The young baby girl's cries had ceased, and silence overtook the house. There was no light, no warmth, and the tears shed weren't as his parents had been all those years ago. He and Emily stood over the vacant crib and wept, prayed. But death never returned the child. "It isn't right. It isn't fair," Thomas cried. "Why punish those I love? Why take life from their veins? It was I that cheated you, Death. I that stood against you. So why? Why take them instead of me?" Thomas explained to Emily the story of a young boy on the brink of death, playing a game of chess to win back his chance for life. A story that he had believed for years to only be a dream. But as he took her warm hands into his icy cold ones, he could see the look of fear in her eyes. "You see," Thomas said, "in order to get the king, one must go through the pawns, and one by one, they'll disappear. Then when the king is left alone with no way to win on his own, the game is over. Life is indeed the cruelest punishment. For you must stand by and watch as each of the other pieces are taken, and you're left defenseless, running, one square at a time, praying that death can't catch up to you." His voice grew shaky as he released Emily's hand. Again, he allowed the tears to come. This time, however, for himself. "It's just like a game of chess, life and death. They're both the same pieces, just painted different colors on opposite sides of the board. Cheat at one, pay for the consequence in the other. You may think that when you, the small pawn, reaches the end of the board, you're given a chance of glory, to be reborn a queen. But in the end, you realize the truth." Thomas looked into Emily's eyes. "She always returns to life, with death's shadow to her."